5 years later, a young student, Lucy Partington, vanished from another bus stop, this time in nearby Cheltenham. Was it possible one of them was the third victim buried at Cromwell Street? Or could they both be there? Forensic psychologist Paul Britton was brought in to profile Fred West and answer the burning question: were there other victims?
I was in a position where I had paperwork that went back 20, 30 years. And as I began to look at that, then the bells began to ring rather grimly for me. Because what I began to see were some of the hallmarks, the highlights of a very dangerous offender. Not at all the man that I'd been told might be sitting downstairs. My view was that all that had happened is you had simply seen 3 high points, and that it was very unlikely, unthinkable really, that you were going to have silences across the intervening years. The time between those 3 marks was going to be filled with other sorts of murder, other sorts of killing.
A man will appear in court this morning following the discovery of 3 bodies in his back garden. 52-year-old Fred West from Gloucester is accused of murdering the women, including his 16-year-old daughter Heather, who disappeared in 1987.
I listened to the news and I just went straight back to 1972, and I was there again, and I remembered those words, you know, bury me under the paving stones. There's hundreds of girls, and I thought paving stones, patio, same thing.
Caroline Roberts looked after Heather when she worked for the Wests as a nanny. Deeply disturbed by news of her death, she rang the police to offer a statement.
That night I couldn't sleep at all. I knew the police were coming in. I was trying to remember all the things that I took 22 years trying to forget. And it was so vivid that in the end I had to get up in the middle of the night and I just wrote everything down. It was haunting for me because I really felt responsible for their deaths. It was almost like they were my family. I knew them all intimately, and I think that's because I know up to a point I shared the same experience as them.
Another call to the police, this time from a friend of the parents of Linda Gough, a girl who had gone missing in 1973 and whose last known address was 25 Cromwell Street. New information started to emerge.
During the course of looking for her, Mrs. Gough had gone to the address and been told by a woman and her husband, Linda had left some time previously.
Linda's mother had noticed that Rose was wearing her daughter's slippers. If this was the case, and Linda was one of Fred's victims, it was possible Rose knew about the murders.
She's not here.
He was also wearing a cardigan or some knitted clothing that was Linda's, and outside on a whirligig type washing line was some of Linda's nightwear.
The Wests told Mrs. Gough that Linda had moved on, leaving some of her things behind. Believing their story, but unable to locate Linda, June Gough waited for her daughter's return. Years went by, but Linda never came back. Caroline Roberts first met the Wests 6 months before Linda moved in. In her statement to the police, Caroline recalled in chilling detail how the Wests selected their potential victims.
This one night I was hitchhiking back from Tewkesbury on my own, and this car pulled up with 2 people in, and this was Fred and Rose West. When I first got in there, I didn't think they were a couple because of the age difference and the fact that she was quite an attractive young girl and he was not an attractive man. As we went on our way back towards Cinderford, we got talking and they seemed really friendly, and that's when I found out they'd just got married and that they had 3 little girls. And they were talking to me and asking me about what I was doing and that, and I said that I tried to avoid being at home as much as possible because my stepdad, we kind of just didn't get on. And with that, they both at the same time just turned around and said, "Hey, would you like to come and work with us, looking after our children?" And within a week of meeting them, I moved in to 25 Cromwell Street.
Caroline's job would be to look after Heather, newly born baby May, and Anna Marie, the oldest child from Fred's first failed marriage.
One of the strange things was that they had a lot of visitors, mainly men, coming to the house. And I used to look after the children while Rose was with these men. And I'm sure she must have told me she was a masser, which I believed at that time.
There was an even darker side to Fred.
He'd tell me things like he'd performed abortions. "Oh, don't worry if you get pregnant, Caroline, you know, we can put you right. I can do abortions. I've done abortions before now." And and the sickening thing was that he would say things like, "Yeah, and the women were so grateful, they'd offer their bodies to me straight after." Which, yeah, and I thought, nah, this man's just making it all up. He ain't right.
Shortly after, Caroline left Cromwell Street hoping never to return. But Fred and Rose had other plans for her. For Paul Britton, Caroline Roberts' statement made one thing clear: the house was the key. To understand the Wests fully and what went on inside their home, he needed to visit the crime scene. He needed to visit Cromwell Street.
It was an ordinary house. It was one of a row. It was the end one, as I recall, and I think its neighbour on one side was a church. The church walls made the boundary on one side of the house. Going up the stairs, they're quite steep, but as you turn round, on the back of the doorway and the bit above the doorway, there is a full-length picture of a woman, very reminiscent of the younger Rosemary, beckoning.
Disturbing details of the Wests' lives started to emerge. Bedrooms Rose used for prostitution, fitted with listening and recording devices so that Fred could watch. But most significant of all for Britton was the cellar.
This part of the house was quite self-contained. People could go about whatever they did there, being reasonably sure that they weren't going to be disturbed. If you came in through the back way, you'd have to come in through kitchens and a bathroom area, and to get to where we are now is quite an intricate little route. So you're not going to be disturbed. There are no external windows, the brickwork is quite thick. You are in the lower part of the foundation of the house. So that, if you like, is the... It serves a joint function. It's the ultimate pleasure room, but it's also the working room. It's the room where these dreadful things are done.
He told the police to move their search inside the house.
I mean, the words in a way were clumsy, but I mean, they're in the garden because the house is already full.
Paul Britton had said that West was a predatory sexual psychopath, and he had said quite clearly that there was a possibility of there being more victims.
I'm saying now that you are facing something that you have never, ever seen before, and probably very few of your colleagues have seen, and you really don't want to see it.
The police began to search the cellar for more victims. Fred was told they had moved inside the house. He was also questioned about Linda Goff and why Rose had been wearing her clothes. Fred refused to answer.
Just after 5:30 that afternoon, I received a phone call from the cell block to say that Howard Ogden, the solicitor who was representing West, had asked to see me urgently. When he arrived, he appeared quite pale, and I remember he asked me if I'd like to sit